Today we're going to tie a fly that you can use for ice fishing. There's several different options we can do with this fly pattern. It's totally up to you on how you'd like to do it. This fly is going to use a size 8 hook, and the variety of hooks you can use is up to you. We're going to use this size 8 Mustad bait holder hook, a size 8 scud hook. I've even tied some of these on these cheap size 4 needlepoint octopus hooks if you can find them, or nymph hook. You can also tie these in other size hooks if you want, 10, 12, all the way up depending on the size fish you're going after. Besides the hook, for the materials we're going to be using a bead, either a plastic bead like this or tungsten beads. We're going to use some various colors of dubbing, and this fly we're going to be using a cheap product here you can get at the hobby stores, and it's a this is 0.8 millimeter Stretch Magic cord, clear. It does come in a variety of colors if you wanted to, but we're going to show you how to do this with just the clear, and some metal wire of your choice in color. And the thread here is going to be either a size 70 UTC or a size 140, depending on how much you wind up breaking the thread. And in one option we're going to show you is using some lead wire so that the fly will sink. So let's get started. So I mentioned before that we had options in beads. This fly we're going to tie has a heavy tungsten bead on the front that's a brass colored. We can also do a plastic bead, and you'll see here I have lead wire wrapped around the hook. So to get started, you put your bead on the hook and then you put your hook in the vise, and we're just going to start our thread behind the bead and cover this shank of the hook, going back to about the barb and going forward. And I'm just going to lay down and coat the entire hook with thread here to make sure we've got good coverage. The next thing we're going to do is put on a piece of wire. So I'm going to lay this wire on the back of the hook going right up to the bead and tie that good and tight. And I'm just going to let the spool hang here. The next part is we're going to take a small chunk of this clear stretch tube. I'm going to lay that alongside the wire. I don't want it to be on top of the wire, but I want to lay it alongside of it and tie that down. Now I'm going to go over this whole thing again with thread just to make sure we've got it nice and tight. And one thing I like to do is to hold this rubber tubing up and do a couple of wraps behind it. And you'll see why in just a second. So I'm going to advance my thread up to the front of the hook right behind the bead, and for this one we're simply going to wrap this cord over, doing tight wraps. And the reason I like to do a couple of wraps behind the stretch cord before we get going is so that it doesn't want to keep going backwards. We can do this and it'll start to go forward right away. So we want to keep these wraps tight. Right up, one up against the other. We don't want to overlap. And I get right up behind the bead. tie that off and clip it. So I simply want to do 4 or 5 wraps right on top of the tubing and trim that. Now I'm going to do a few more to try to get that little tag end tied down so it's not sticking up too much. But it doesn't matter if it is, because we're going to be covering that. Next, we're going to take our wire and find the grooves in between, get my thread out of the way, in between the stretch cord, and lay this in here. It's not going to hold the cord down, it goes in between them, but it gives a little bit of a color variation to your fly. And again, we're going to get up to the front, and much like how we tied off the rubber cord, we'll do a few wraps and then trim it. Now if you're using a thin cord, you can probably just wiggle and snap it. I, however, am using if you're using a thin wire, you could probably just wiggle it and snap it. But my wire is a little heavier, so I'm going to pinch it down, cut it, and then do a few wraps just to make sure. After we've got the wire and stuff secured, we're going to put a color on here, and I think for this, for contrast, I'm going to use a little blue. So we'll do some dubbing. I pulled some of this dubbing out and just spin it onto your thread. Put a little bit more on if we need. And I'm just going to cover up right behind the bead. Pull it back so I'm not going over the top. And now we'll do a quick whip finish. Make sure to do it behind the bead. And that's it. Put a little dab of head cement on the threads, just so it doesn't come untied. We don't want to cement down all of the dubbing. So, and there you have it. Oops. And there you have it. Quick little simple fly. Again, you can add and there you have it. A quick little simple fly you can use for ice fishing with the weight on there. Again, you can do various options with it. This fly here has a little bit of a green tail to it. There is lead wrapped underneath the body, and it has a plastic bead on the front. We have another option similar to the same one tied on the octopus hook. It has lead underneath and then no tail. If you got any questions, post messages, let us know. Thanks. And visit our website at tu642.org.